Okay, let's just dive right in with an absolutely staggering number, $6 billion. That is the sheer value of trapped Iranian oil, and it's just sitting there completely idle at sea right now. It is literally setting the ultimate high-stakes stage for the story we're looking at today.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to map out exactly how a distant military standoff in the Middle East is creating this massive ripple effect, and it's one that directly inflates the cost of your very next meal. We're looking at a wild situation where international supply chains, heavy military posturing, and high-level global diplomacy are all colliding right in front of us, in real time.
So, Section 1, the Hormuz naval blockade. We've got to begin right at the geopolitical epicenter, which is the narrow, heavily contested waters of the Strait of Hormuz.
Get this. Right now, 41 massive oil tankers holding roughly 69 million barrels of oil have been completely blocked by U.S. Central Command. They've essentially been turned into giant floating warehouses. And this isn't just some paper sanction issued in Washington. No, it's an active, physical campaign at sea. Ships are being inspected, routes are entirely blocked, and dozens of attempts to break this naval blockade have been completely shut down.
Now, why does this matter so much? Well, it creates an immediate economic chokehold. Iran's biggest problem right now isn't just finding a buyer, it's finding physical space to actually put all this oil. Current assessments indicate Iran has maybe 14 to 22 days of storage capacity left. That's it. If they run out of space, they are literally forced to shut down wells. And that isn't like just turning off a light switch. Doing that alters the natural pressure, risks water seeping into the oil layers, and it can cause billions of dollars in permanent infrastructure damage that could take years to fix.
Which brings us to Section 2, escalating military tensions. Let's look at how this economic pressure builds into an unprecedented, asymmetric military buildup out on the water.
What's really fascinating here is the stark contrast in how both sides are approaching this. You've got Washington projecting massive conventional power, while Tehran is relying on quick, asymmetric disruption. Both sides are heavily armed, no doubt about it, but they are playing completely different games on this geopolitical chessboard.
To enforce this total blockade, the U.S. has concentrated an absolutely overwhelming force. We're talking about 3 entire aircraft carriers, the Abraham Lincoln, the Gerald Ford, and the George Bush, plus over 200 aircraft and around 15,000 crew members. It's a massive strike group designed to send one very clear message. The sea is no longer an open route for unapproved traffic, and the U.S. has the capability to move instantly from mere deterrence to direct fire.
But, Iran isn't exactly relying on traditional ships to fight back. Their real strength lies in coastal ballistic missile launchers and these deep underground facilities. So to counter this, the U.S. military has actually requested the deployment of the Dark Eagle. Now, this is a highly advanced, long-range hypersonic weapon that flies at 5 times the speed of sound. That's over 6,000 kilometers per hour. It uses a glide body to move unpredictably, completely evading radar to target those hidden underground bunkers.
All right, moving to Section 3, a diplomatic deadlock. Because we have to ask, what happens when these two immense military strategies finally meet at the negotiating table?
Well, it perfectly explains why the recent 21-hour talks in Islamabad completely stalled out. We are stuck in a fundamental trap. Iran wants the sea opened and its economy breathing before it even discusses its nuclear program. Conversely, the U.S. and Israel demand the nuclear threat, which includes hundreds of kilograms of enriched uranium, is resolved first, before lifting the blockade. Neither side is willing to blink and give up their primary leverage.
So, with diplomacy failing, intelligence officials have laid out 3 highly escalating military options for the U.S. president to consider, and they are intense. They range from targeting civilian infrastructure directly to physically seizing maritime territory in the straits, or even putting special forces on the ground to actively hunt for that enriched uranium.
Now, complicating all of this is American domestic law. To bypass the 1973 War Powers Resolution, which basically requires congressional approval for any military action lasting beyond 60 days, the administration is using a very specific legal strategy. By reframing the entire conflict as a special military operation meant to force a deal rather than an actual war, they are attempting to maintain this blockade indefinitely, all without a green light from Congress.
Meanwhile, traditional U.S. allies in NATO are really fracturing away from the strategy. Nations like the UK, Spain, and France, they are openly refusing to participate in a blockade they fear is just going to ignite a broader regional war. Germany has even openly criticized the strategy, arguing that these drawn-out negotiations are basically humiliating the U.S.
European nations are insisting on returning the strait to normal commercial operations rather than enforcing this chokehold. Which brings us to Section 4, the global economic shock. This is the hard pivot. How exactly does a naval deadlock and a diplomatic failure thousands of miles away actually reach your wallet?
Well, global markets are officially panicking. The sheer uncertainty has sent Brent crude oil spiking 7% to a whopping $126 a barrel. Just to put that into perspective, that is the highest level we have seen since the 2022 Russia-Ukraine conflict. And as we all know, when crude oil spikes, the cost of manufacturing, transport, and literally daily life spikes right along with it.
Just consider how this distant conflict is hitting the kitchen table in India. The Indian government has managed to temporarily shield everyday domestic petrol and diesel prices, but commercial cooking gas, it's skyrocketed overnight. The 19-kilogram commercial cylinder saw a massive jump of 993 rupees in a single day. What that means is, the local bakery, the neighborhood dhaba, your favorite restaurant, their operating costs just surged. So the price of your next meal out is going up immediately.
And the economic pain doesn't stop at Hormuz. To retaliate against U.S., Iranian proxy groups, like the Houthis in Yemen, are now threatening secondary shipping routes, specifically the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This is forcing enormous cargo vessels to avoid the Red Sea entirely and take massive, sweeping detours around South Africa. We're talking an added 10 to 15 days of sailing, and literally millions of dollars in extra costs for just one single journey.
Because of this, analysts are now seriously sounding the alarm. If both the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea chokepoints remain compromised and closed to normal traffic, the global price of crude could hit an economy-breaking $150 a barrel. At that level, the resulting inflation would drastically impact absolutely everything, from the price of everyday plastics to the cost of heating homes worldwide. It's a scary thought.
So, moving to our final part, Section 5, Shifting Alliances for Energy. Faced with this crippling economic reality, nations around the world are scrambling, and they're entirely redrawing their diplomatic maps.
You can see this geopolitical fallout crystal clear in Indonesia's recent outreach to Vladimir Putin, because they can no longer rely on a predictable flow of oil from the Middle East due to the blockade. Massive nations like Indonesia are being driven straight into Moscow's arms just to secure alternative, reliable energy supplies.
This blockade is literally and diplomatically rerouting global power. The United Arab Emirates, for example, is exploring entirely new pipeline routes that completely bypass the Iranian coast, sending energy straight to the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, because traditional mediators like Pakistan just lack the leverage to guarantee a massive peace deal here, analysts are now looking to China and Russia to step in and mediate this crisis.
So, as we watch inflation rise, global shipping reroute, and historic alliances fundamentally shift, we are left with a critical challenge. How long can the global economy really survive relying on just a few volatile miles of water? And what is the world map going to look like when the dust and the oil finally settles? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really encourage you to keep questioning the world around you.